Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Jonathan, and I'm a TOEFL trainer, TOEFL coach, and long-term English teacher for at least about 25 years now, and helping students from all around the world with their TOEFL training. And the purpose of this session here is to really focus on the kind of delivery aspect of speaking, not specifically the kind of what should I say in a template or how to kind of structure the response. Those are definitely details to consider. Additionally, with the language aspect, which is like grammar, vocabulary range, and those are things that students can work on their own, but where I see a lot of students struggling and not getting enough feedback is on the delivery. So first of all, on here, you'll see that I have several links, and we'll go through these links together, and I'll make sure that you have access to this document. So I'm going to put this link here in the chat box, make sure it's available for you to view, so you can go through and click on and keep a list of these references. Yeah, so there. Okay. I'm going to get that in the chat box. That will put all of these notes on here, so you should be able to access that. Okay. Okay. So the first thing when I mentioned delivery, and let me zoom in here a little bit, and how this affects the speaking scores, and especially if there's like how these numbers convert to a score out of 30. So a few things to notice on here in the general description part, where down here in a score of a 3, it says that a student's score, like for one audio file, which could be question number 1, question 2, question 3, or question 4, each audio recording is scored separately. And then the scores are averaged together to get this, like all of those 4 scores create an average. That average gets converted to a score out of 30. So when this says 2 of the following, the way your recording is being scored is there's a human evaluator who needs to give a whole number, either a 3 or a 4. They don't give you a like 3.5 or 4 point, or they don't give you scores in between. They have to give you something holistic, meaning it has to be on this row. So if a score of a 3 represents that they probably heard 2 of these columns, not all 3 of them. So in my experience, what that usually ends up reflecting is that if a student is using a template, that's the topic development, that they're organized, they're structured, they have certain sentences to introduce their ideas, they're using a specific phrasing, which does help with organization. But the audio needs to be more than just organization and structure. There's also the language use, which is the grammar correct? Does it sound mostly correct and automatic? Like the person isn't hesitating too much to add the letter S at the end of a he, she, it affirmative verb, or the ed ending after like past simple affirmative, or pausing unnecessarily in between kind of the things that are related to grammar. Is the vocabulary range appropriate for that question? Is it a kind of wide range of vocabulary, academic words, standard words, hopefully avoiding slang, which is probably not the most appropriate in the academic setting, depending on the question, but mostly having some kind of range, broad range of this vocabulary, and flexibility with the suffixes. So are you able to turn your vocabulary words into nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs, and adapt that with the sentence structure, and have a variety of sentence structures as well, which can be simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. If those concepts are kind of not clear, I'll make sure to include some links as well to the sentence variety aspect. But when students kind of just stop there, there's answer is structured and the grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure aspect is under control, and that's already kind of occupying all of their effort and their focus and their concentration, they're still missing something from their recording. And that something, when we look at the score of a 4, which is the highest score, what that something is usually missing is this delivery aspect. So delivery gets into the details of prosody, which are stress, intonation, rhythm, word stress, sentence stress, rising tone, falling tone, pitch. Pitch is if you have like a musical instrument on a piano, for example, the high notes, that's a higher pitch, the lower note, that's a lower pitch. Also vowel length, how long you hold a certain vowel. Those have certain important features for English, and there are differences with other languages around the world that have similarities and also have major differences with the overall sound, and the pacing, how fast you're speaking, and where you pause, where you breathe, or where you separate your words, or where you group words together. These are quite often concepts that take students a long time to assimilate and to practice, to the point that they're doing it automatically without having to think about it at every moment that they're speaking. Because if you're thinking about it too much, you can lose concentration and get disorganized with your answer, or if you're too busy thinking about your grammar and vocabulary range and sentence structure, but you don't have enough of these things automated that you can free up your kind of bandwidth or your kind of computer, like this RAM, if you can kind of free up that kind of memory, because if you have a slow computer, things slow down, and it's not fluid, it's not fast. So we need to be able to do all of these three things: be organized, have good grammar and vocabulary and sentence structures with variety, but also add in this expressive delivery aspect. So a lot of students will approach delivery as, okay, that's the last thing I'm going to work on. And I usually encourage people like, okay, don't wait until the end of your preparation to start looking at your sound. Start working on your sound from the beginning, because these things they can take a long time and effort to really sink in. So if you just think it's like, I'm going to add it on at the end, like some salt and pepper, that's not enough, it's not enough an effort to really make sure that that is an integral part of your speaking. It's not just a little extra add-on at the end of your preparations. This needs to be, baked in really into your sound on there. And so this really does separate these higher level scores, higher level quality of speaking from students who are possibly getting 23, 24. These more advanced scores, according to TOEFL, are coming when at least 2 of these recordings, 2 of the 4, can get a score of a 4. So when we take, let's say, question 1, question 2, it doesn't have to be question 1, question 2. If that got a 3 and a 3, in questions 3 and 4, got a 4 and a 4, those combined would create an average of 3.5, and that 3.5 is converting to, I mean, possibly a 25, 26. But definitely when all the scores are converted to a 3, a 3.0, that converts to a 23 out of 30. Let me show you some of those numbers. I'm probably giving you too many numbers here, but so yeah, here, yeah, when we take that 3 out of 3, or sorry, 3 out of 3, and we get that on all 4 scores, that converts to this 23 out of 30. If one of our scores goes up to a 4, we're now possibly getting a 24 out of 30. If we can get 2 of those scores a 4, and the other 2 a 3, this now converts to 26. And if we can get 3 of our scores out of 4, and the last one is a 3, or it doesn't have to be which one is a 3, that gets a 28. And finally, when all of our scores are a 4, that's a 30 out of 30. So how exactly do we do that? Well, this gets into these aspects of the delivery, the prosody. So here are some of these details, like what goes into prosody. So stress is when we are making something loud. That would be the stress. And maybe we're doing it at the lexical level. So that's the word. We're doing it at the sentence level. So this takes into consideration more details. And how do we know when we're changing this on the stress with the sentence versus the word? So in a word, you can look in a dictionary and you can see something like that has this little line at the top, and that's called primary stress. If we see a little line at the bottom, that's called secondary stress. So to just give you an example, if I do something like the Oxford dictionary here, this learner's dictionary, I'm just going to mute here, sorry. Just mute for now, okay? So on here, when I mentioned primary and secondary stress, and I'll make sure to add that dictionary notes. And this is not just only for Oxford Dictionary. This is just one of them that I like because it includes the phonetic symbols. But if I take a word like before, I'm expecting to see the little line right here, which indicates that coming after that line, that's where we have this stress. It's going to be loud, and it's also going to be long. So I'm expecting to see that with the word before. And that is what we see here. We see this little line, and it's right before 4. Now, it doesn't quite matter here if it's like a British or American English here. This word stress pattern that's still the same there for this particular word before. There are words between American English, British English that can have some differences. For example, like advertisement. Advertisement is more of a British one where the word stress pattern is a little different. but overall, American and British, most of the words that we're using here on the TOEFL, it's making a small difference, and TOEFL can't really like take points away because somebody else is speaking with a British accent or Canadian accent or Australian accent or Irish accent, or it's more that you're consistent with your speaking overall. So being aware of word stress is here, for example, this primary stress, that's an important detail that can be part of these stress patterns. Do you know where those syllables are loud? And as I mentioned, that there's also secondary stress. If I take a word like information, the in has secondary stress and the may has primary stress. So I'll draw this on the screen in just a second, but what the shape of this word, it looks like if we have this kind of loudest, medium, and lowest volume for that, like loud, we're starting with like information. So it's kind of like a roller coaster where we start off in the middle, we go down, and then we come up, and that's the loudest one with this primary stress. And this one down here has this, sorry, no, not there. This one here has this kind of secondary stress. So this infer, this is a weak syllable. And then down here we have shin, which is also a weak syllable, and it's short. So this for, it's soft and short, and shin is also soft and short. And this in, it's not the loudest syllable in the word, it's the second loudest syllable. It does have that volume there. It is long, but perhaps not quite as long as this may shin. And this one is long and it is loud. So it creates this kind of big, kind of almost rectangular, loud, long block of sound that we hear. In this in, it is also kind of a rectangle, but not quite as imposing as this may. And if I could, I'm going to kind of trying to shrink this a little bit more. I would try to make this very, very short here and also very short here. So one more time, let me just kind of redraw that just a little bit to kind of this little block. And one more time, sorry. I do want it to be a rectangle. And then down here, very soft, very short. So I'll just do kind of like a little dot. And then up here, even louder and longer. And then another little dot. Okay. So in my mind, I want to visualize my words with shape and texture in terms of this volume and length. And then right after it, right before, there's usually something that's weak, which is short and soft. And this creates a big relief, a big contrast between what's coming next. So this dot and then this loud, long syllable here, and then this dot, another way we could visualize that is almost like a trapezoid. So this part here is this kind of a weak syllable. And then down here is also the kind of this weak syllable. So we're kind of tapering off, it's shortening, and the volume is coming down in contrast to this big block of sound, which is long and which is also loud on there. Okay. We need to hear these big contrasts within our words and then also within our sentences. So it's not enough to just like only do it once. for a few words in the first sentence of our recording, and then forget about it because we got distracted, and we're distracted with the timer, distracted with the question, distracted with other people talking around us. We need to be able to maintain this concentration on our sound, but practice it enough that we're not actually concentrating on it. Like these patterns become automated and like just an automatic reflex in our speaking. But in order for that to happen, we really need to pay attention to these patterns that exist by listening to native speakers, paying attention to things we hear on YouTube, on podcasts, on audiobooks, on the TV, on the radio. There's so much sound that exists in English. There isn't really much of an excuse with the internet to say, oh, I wasn't familiar with these sound patterns. What is a possible excuse, though, is that nobody has ever shown this to me. And that is something that I do understand where students say, like, if we say, oh, go listen to a lot of this sound, but if the untrained ear is not guided, then it is possible to say like, okay, I've heard English all my life. I've heard all these things, music and sound and poetry and books and actors and public speaking and podcasting. Like I've heard all those things, but nobody has really sat down to walk me through these sound patterns and say, this is how I'm being graded on the TOEFL. Like these aspects, how much can I make the way I speak sound like these patterns, or how much do I kind of stay away from this and say, no, that's not me. That's not how I speak. And there's more of an influence from our native language. And those patterns can be very different. And we can immediately detect, oh, there's a foreign accent. And in some cases, that foreign accent can affect the understanding of that message. So there are cases where the TOEFL is being used, especially in the medical industries, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing, where those communication difficulties can really create some, literally life or death situations if we don't understand, if we can't communicate clearly in an emergency. Hopefully we don't have those situations where it's an emergency, but we need clear communication, and these things on delivery can make a huge difference on that. So hopefully this is becoming clear that this is just at the word level, the lexical level, which is having that primary and secondary stress. The dictionary can help you with this, yet the dictionary, it's really just one word and it doesn't have the context of a sentence. So when we take a word and then we insert it into a sentence, that takes another level of priority. The sentence has higher priority and higher authority or hierarchy of consideration than just the word by itself. A word by itself does have these patterns that we see in the dictionary, but we need to remember that words do not just exist in isolation. They exist in the context of a sentence. So when we get to the sentence level, we need to consider other things. So there's the grammar of the sentence, and each word has a specific purpose in the sentence. And just as a person, me by myself, I need a context for me to have a purpose in that room in a way. So depending on the other people around me, my purpose or my relationship with those other people changes depending on who are those people and the conditions of the environment. So just to keep it very simple, I would say if I am with my children, in that case, okay, I'm the parent and I'm the authority figure. So I do have some decision-making power and influence over my children. If I am a teacher, in this case, giving this workshop and having all this information that I'm sharing with you, that's a different situation. Yet there is a dynamic where I'm here to help and here to influence and here to share information. So my influence is different. Yet if I become a student and I go to a classroom and I'm learning something with another teacher, well, I'm going to probably be a lot more quiet and silent and kind of waiting for this information guidance from my teacher. So that dynamic is changing on the situation and kind of who is influenced the situation, who's in control, or maybe it isn't always just a situation of control and influence power. Maybe I am talking to my neighbor in my apartment, and so it's neither one of us has some authority. We are equals, or I go to my children's school and I'm talking to one of their teachers or their principal, or so I'm not. I myself am a teacher, but I'm not my child's teacher. So I'm waiting for some information from my child's teacher. So there's a different dynamic where, I don't know, two adults, but my child's teacher is the one who has influenced my child. So a word and a sentence in a way is like wearing those different hats and having those different relationships with the other words in that sentence. One thing very clear, very concrete that I share with students is this website that's this content and function words, is that once we get away from the dictionary and seeing that the word has its own like word stress patterns, like these primary, secondary stress patterns, the other thing to consider is what is each word doing in a sentence. Is a word a VIP word, like it gets a lot of emphasis and like a spotlight on it, or is it a background word that should not get as much spotlight? So the words that do get that spotlight, these content words, these are our nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. These are the key VIP words in our sentence. These are the VIP words. And this is where we get that spotlight, that all that light being focused right down on that word. And by contrast, these other words, the not nouns, not verb, not adjectives, not adverb, they are in the background. Okay. So also, in terms of the grammar of the sentence, the nouns, these end up becoming our subjects of our clauses, the subjects before our verbs. The nouns also end up being the objects after transitive verbs. They also end up becoming the indirect objects. If, for example, if I give a book to my friend, the to my friend is also a noun. And we have a subject I, a book is an object, to my friend is the indirect. Also, the nouns are part of our adverbs of where did we do that? At home, at school. When did we do it? On Monday, on the weekend. So the prepositional phrases do require nouns as well. So the nouns do come out in prepositional phrases that can be part of how we did something, where we did something, when we did something, why we did something. So nouns are an important part of our sentences, and we want to give them a lot of importance with that loud volume, long, stressed syllables, short, unstressed syllables. And not all verbs are equally important, because we also have auxiliary verbs, which we'll see in the functions, but the actions, the main ideas of those verbs of like, I'm going to buy a book, buy with the money, that's the main action. I'm going to, that's kind of a periphrastic kind of auxiliary to say like, my intention is to buy a book, or I will buy a book. But I want to hear the verb buy, and I hear the word book. I want to hear those two words loud and long. And I want to hear the like I a little bit shorter. It is a subject, but it's a pronoun. It's not as important there. Okay. So the contrast here, these function words, as I mentioned, an auxiliary verb like will, going to, be, and have. These are not as important as the action verb. Prepositions, they do go with nouns, but we don't give so much importance to the preposition itself. That can be for prepositions of when did this happen? On Monday. Where? On the desk. Okay. Articles, the desk, a book, they are part of the grammar, but not as important as the noun. So the, we need them, but we're not going to put the spotlight on or the. And conjunctions, these are like and, but, or, they are the glue in a compound sentence, but they're not the important word in the sentence. And then pronouns like I, me, him, her, we need them in the sentence, but they're not the important, like the full nouns, like the full word. So a pronoun, it's like less important than the full noun itself. And if you look at this table, these tables, you don't really get much of an idea of what the sentence is expressing if you just look at those words alone. But if you go back up to these ones and look at the nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs, if those were the only words you heard in the sentence, you could kind of guess what that sentence is about. These words give the substance, the main ideas of those words. And this also goes definitely hand in hand with listening comprehension. I definitely recommend students to pay attention to these differences between content and function words, because if you take notes on the content words, you'll get the main ideas of a professor's lecture or the main ideas of a conversation that you hear in the listening section or in the audio files that they give you in the integrated speaking for questions 2, 3, and 4, where there's a conversation and then 2 lectures, or in the writing section with the first integrated essay, you are listening to a professor's lecture. So these things that you show and express in terms of these words are important and they're louder, longer, and I'm making sure my pronunciation is clear on those words. If I make that effort with my speaking, I'm probably going to notice this when somebody else is doing it when I need to listen and take notes, which is on 3 sections of the test, except for the reading section. The next thing after this is pausing. So once you recognize that these words are important, one thing that we do in English is that we give a slight pause. We give some breathing room to that word and we can hear it because there is this tiny little pause. So many languages don't quite approach this the same way. They will say all the words are kind of like some of them that are a syllable timed language where all the syllables are basically the same length and all the words are basically equally kind of important. So we get an effect of just bump, 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 bump. And where do we breathe? Well, when you run out of air. English is not making that same reaction to say, oh, all the syllables are equally the same and we can breathe anywhere. English is saying, no, we breathe in certain strategic places. And how do we know where those certain strategic places are? Basically, it's after a noun, after a verb. So like in the house, I can write something here, like in the house, there is a table. On the table, there is a book. It's very similar structure, but I'm trying to group these together of in the house and comma. There's a book, there's a table, and period. On the table, there's a book. So I don't want to breathe in between a preposition and an article. So if I do something like in the house, this is going to create a problem in my speaking because either I sound hesitant because my vocabulary words like in the, okay, I'm hesitating, or even more worse than just a hesitation, in the house. This is going to reduce the quality of my speaking. So we want to get rid of these or or pause. So if we see a phrase, a prepositional phrase like preposition, article, noun, don't interrupt that. Also here, in the house, that's also creating a problem for my phrasing. So here, preposition, article, noun, don't interrupt that. That becomes one phrase. There is a table. Here it's an auxiliary kind of a phrase of, it's almost like an equal sign. We want to join that together, like this, yeah, this ends up being a pronoun there. It replaces the house. So yes, it is a pronoun. It replaces the word house. There is a table. I want to deliver those 4 words together in one phrase. I don't want to interrupt it. Like there is a table. I want to create one phrase all together. So yeah, pronoun, verb, pronoun, auxiliary verb, article, noun, make that one phrase. And the sound in your voice, or the confidence in your voice, and like how like secure you sound when speaking, it can really go down. The quality can go down if you add in these ums and uhs. And there is I mentioned that there's a human evaluating you when when they're listening to your recordings. There's definitely also a computer algorithm that is detecting all the things that you're saying, all the pauses. It's doing a lot of calculations, micro calculations of detecting how long are these pauses in between your words. Are there pauses? How long are those pauses? Are they pauses in the right places? Also, are you using a lot of these ums and uhs in between those words? Some of those ums and uhs can be part of stress and anxiety, not stress like word stress, sentence stress, but stress in terms of how are you dealing with the exam center experience, or how are you doing with the taking the test, like the home edition. Either way, it can induce some anxiety, some stress, and some discomfort with your speaking, because you're very self-conscious with how do I sound, and I know I'm being judged by how I speak. So I'm using ums and uhs as well. I'm trying to reduce those if I can when speaking, and try to replace them with like silence when possible. Even as a native speaker, it is a reflex, it is a habit, it's something it is difficult to eliminate it completely, but I am aware of it. So when I give myself some focus and say, okay, try to reduce those ums and uhs, not to the point where I'm feeling embarrassed or feeling ashamed that I'm using them, but just try to reduce them if I can. Maybe I need to slow down a little bit. A lot of students, they say, oh, I need to race in my speaking. I need to speak as fast as possible. I don't think that is actually good advice, because if we do this too fast, we can lead to mistakes. But if we give ourselves just a little bit of a pacing where we can slow down enough to keep things under control, that's a good pace. They also, in terms of pacing, like our speed, they want to see that we can maintain this. Because if we go too fast, then we're going to trip and fall and make some mistakes, and then it's hard to recover. If we go too slow, well, we don't have enough time to cover all the information that we need to cover, especially if we have a lot of notes with questions 2, 3, and 4, because it's no longer depending on our thoughts and ideas for question 1. Now it's like we took all this information that came from a text on the screen for questions 2 and 3, and then combined with information that we heard in the conversation or the lecture. Or question 4, we have all this information that's probably about 2 minutes long, and we're possibly taking lots of notes if our listening comprehension is quite high. And unfortunately, some students want to like put all of those notes back into their 60-second response. and they intentionally give you more information than you can process to see if you can also filter and summarize and paraphrase. They don't actually want you to take 2 minutes of audio and then try to rush through it as fast as you can, because that's going to create mistakes. They want to see that you can filter, what are these content words? What are these important details? How can you be expressive with that information, not just racing through all that information as fast as you can, because you're probably going to create some mistakes. So this pausing, where is it okay to pause? How do I create these phrases? So we want to be expressive with our phrasing. Another word, there's a link that I put in the notes here, is this thought chunking. Another way to call this is grouping of these words. And there are patterns that we are expecting. And the more you listen to native speakers, especially when you listen to improvised speech, especially like, for example, you hear an interview. So where somebody listens to a question and then they think, how are they going to respond? And maybe they don't have a lot of time that they're thinking and responding. Those are good opportunities to see where do they put those like ums and uhs or little pauses, or where do they reach a content word and pause, and how are they separating their sentences into groups. So if you can observe that, that's a great opportunity to learn those patterns. And you can also see it with transcriptions. There are interviews, like podcast interviews, where people have the transcriptions, and you can notice, you can listen to the audio file and look at the transcription. Also, TED Talks are a great opportunity for transcriptions, where somebody's on stage giving a presentation. They've probably rehearsed it hundreds of times before getting on stage. And there's a transcription, you can see where did they pause, because they probably thought about that. They didn't completely improvise all of those pauses. They probably prepared some of those pauses in advance. So any opportunity where you have a combination of text and audio, where you can look at this and observe it, it's a great opportunity to be learning these patterns on where are the content words, where are those important words in their sentences. Maybe it's a subconscious thing, maybe it's something intentional because they rehearsed it, like a presentation. Maybe it's subconscious, they're reacting to a question on a podcast or on some late night talk show with a host. Those are places where you want to hear a mix of improvised speech and rehearsed speech. Actors in a movie and a TV show, they had to also work on where they're going to pause, how are they going to deliver those lines, and what emphasis they're going to give to certain words. And maybe a director said, cut, no, I want you to change that interpretation. That's not what I meant with those words, or the writer or the script writer. So there's some debates that go into like TV shows and movies as well, where you can change the meaning of a sentence if you emphasize a different word, and the audience might understand something different. And so, yeah, there's lots of opportunities you can observe audio and text on there. So yeah, getting into phrasing, pausing, thought chunking, grouping, that's the next level up once you understand where the content words are and how to move the function words into the background. So this is definitely things that I work on with students, and usually at least in that first lesson of how do we improve your delivery. Okay, can you give me a comment here in the chat box to see if these ideas are making sense, if this is clear, if you've heard of these concepts before, if this is like the first time you've heard this. Let me just get a little feedback in the chat box so I can see how you're doing with this information so far. Let me take a look here. Yes, some of these concepts. Yeah, listening and reading, and yeah, scripts, test glider, yes. Yeah, there's also if you have access to some of the TOEFL practice tests, especially ones that are coming from directly from ETS, in their official guide and in the like volume 1, volume 2 of the practice test. One thing that I usually recommend is after you go through the listening section and like approach the listening section as like listening practice, what I would also recommend is go back, look at the transcripts of those listening files, listen again and look at the script, and realize that the people you just listened to, those voice actors, they are professional voice actors who they have been trained and they've been working in the industry for quite some a number of years. And they're not working with improvised information. They have a script of part of the conversation. Even though it might sound like a professor talking to a student or a professor giving a lecture, they're actually just a voice actor reading a script. And some of those scripts are meant to sound like it's improvised, but it's not actually improvised. Everything has been scripted. And that's a good opportunity for you to observe how the speakers are, like which words are loud and long, which words have a pause right after it. And there are some tools that you can use if you are familiar with audio recording tools, and there's these voice recording tools. For example, here there's an online one. So if I just take those phrases that I have on the screen here, like in the house, or there's a table, on the table, there's a book, I'll try reading this in 2 different ways, as possibly a student might send me a recording and how I would be doing this as a native speaker. So let me just click over here, just get that. Okay, so first as a student, and then second as myself. Okay. In the house, there is a table. On the table, there is a book. In the house, there's a table. On the table, there is a book. Okay, now it's fair to say that I'm doing this differently on purpose, but here we can see here is like what I would be doing naturally in the house. There's a table, bum, bum, bum. On the table, there's a book. So I'm trying to make these things kind of both loud and long in the house. So this is very loud, very long. And down here, this in the, I'm decreasing my volume. We can see here it is smaller, it is shorter. So this it's very short and very soft. And then here, there's a table. Also these, there is a table. Those parts are also short and soft. In that it is a subject of the second part of the phrase that is a bit loud and long. Not quite as loud as the word house. So we can see a difference between in the house, that is a much louder, longer word compared to this one, which I guess I could put like medium. So instead of loud and long. So loud, long, soft, short, medium, medium. So in between. And then over here on the table, so on the table, this table is not, and this table is much louder than this table over here. because its function in the sentence is not quite the same in terms of the focus. Like, where do I need to sit? In the house. So I want to draw attention to the speaker or to the listener. I'm talking about the house, and then there's something. And then I'm drawing your attention to the table and then the book. So my focus on which one I give loud and long emphasis gets your attention versus something that's like medium and medium. So I have that within my power as a speaker, and as a listener, this kind of you're kind of observing those differences between loud and long and this kind of a medium. Okay. So yeah, definitely check the ETS for those things. And you can use these kinds of tools as well to see how your voice is doing, and possibly you can put audio from something like your phone next to a microphone, and this might be the original, like something from ETS or a TED Talk or some podcast, and then you listen for 5 seconds, and then you record yourself for like 5 seconds and maybe do a comparison and see what's on the screen to assess that difference. And here, one thing that I was intentionally doing that students are usually doing is lots of these separations. So bump, bump, bump. And the length is kind of equal. Those are things that I want to kind of avoid as a native speaker. I don't want to have all of these pauses in between all of these words. I do want pauses after a phrase, but not lots of these noticeable pauses between every single word. That is a common feature that I see from lots of students. And we need to realize, like, no, we need to group our words together. So like, yeah, this blah, blah, bum, blah, blah, bum. So I hear those as like 1, 2, 3, 4 groups, but not as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't want to hear like 14 separate words. I want to hear groups on there. So that's usually a big contrast between how students are usually speaking. And it also depends on the native language. So, okay. So I will put that over here and some of these things on the content thought chunking, some of these concepts there. Okay. Okay, so there is a video here about thought chunking, and in the video, they have a text that's on the screen, and they go through this process, and they go in and they take these words and they add a slash where there's a pause, and they're also kind of taking some of these words that could be content words. For example, simplicity. This would be a content word, that's a noun. And so we hear this today, and today has that, like the word before has that bum bum. Today, I'd like to talk to you. That's a verb. I'd like to talk to you about simplicity. How many of you in this room think this matters? Okay, I'll let you go through the rest of it and just recognize, like, where would I put something in bold, in like dark? That's like a content word. In a slash, this is a pause, and then try to group these words together. So this is an exercise you can do with this video. Okay. Now, the technology with like text to speech has been getting very it's been getting very advanced, and the programming has been getting very natural sounding. And this is a link you could use if you can take like 200 characters. So the text that I put on here of like, in the house, there's a table, on the table, there's a book. I'm just going to take that and add this to this link, okay? And you should be able to hear the audio when I do that. So I'm going to put, in the house, there is a table. On the table, there is book. and it automatically encodes that. And then I can hear this.
In a house, there is a table. On the table, there is a book.
Okay, so you could actually take a couple of these phrases. I didn't check how many characters that was, but it allows me to get up a couple of sentences there. And you could write out part of your TOEFL response. Obviously, on the test, you can't write a full response, but in general, in terms of your word count, on one of these parts here, in terms of the word count, if you can reach about 90 to 120 words in 45 seconds for question 1, that's a decent range in terms of speaking for about 2 words per second. Now, a word, it's kind of subjective because a word could be 1 syllable, a word could be 5 syllables. So a better thing for this metric would be, in terms of word count, would be how many syllables are you saying? But I don't really have tools that are counting syllables. More or less, these tools are based on words, which are just kind of where's a space. And some of the tools that ETS is using are also looking at your word count as well. But technically, it would be better, would be more objective if we had something that was counting the syllables. Now, if you can get yourself up to about 120, 150 words in the 60-second responses, questions 2, 3, and 4, you could definitely script this. You could write about 8 or 9, 10 sentences, and then take a look at that and put this into this kind of tool that can read those sentences with this kind of an emphasis. You can also download this, so you could listen to this on your phone or your computer and kind of copy that as you can. And then you could probably add this back into some kind of a tool like this. There's another, auto tool called Audacity. This is another tool that I've used with some students just before this session right now. I was working with one student. This is actually an audio file that's basically a computer voice. And this is an audio book that we're working together. And I've asked the student to read the book, make his own recordings, and then we're assessing these patterns on stress, intonation, phrasing, where the pausing. And if we zoom in at the beginning, I just did that too much. Yeah, it's not responding immediately. No, okay, there it is. So if I go all the way back to the beginning here, I can see some of these patterns, these kinds of things that I've been explaining to you right now. Where's the, yeah. So this kind of a phrase, it says like, first of all. And here's that preposition of. So let me just play that for a second.
First of all, let me get something straight.
Yeah, so that's a computer program. It's very similar to the one I'm showing you right now that has just like that tiny little phrase. And it is actually very expressive. And we can see that that first syllable, first of ball, and that's very long. And then let me get something straight. And that's a little bit longer. And that's the end of that phrase. And we can see these pauses. So we see the grouping of the words here, these syllables, first of all, and in the text, it would have a comma right after first of all. Let me get something straight. And there's probably a period there. And then after that period, we have a little bit of a pause. And then we get the start of the next sentence, and there's a group there. And this is also something you could probably see if you took a transcript and an audio file from like the ETS, one of the listening section details, or you took something from a podcast or a TED Talk as well. So these are things you want to be observing and noticing on there. Okay. So more details here on how can we work on this. So this is also a video that I've made going through some slides. I wanted to show you these slides directly, not just show you that video. So on here, we have these patterns, and also you can see some of those audio file patterns there. So volume, it's just a third. It's not the only thing loud. We also need this pitch, like it's a higher voice, lower voice, and how long are those syllables. And the vowel length, that definitely is a feature that the computer the algorithm is assessing on your score reports that are coming from the computer. And here, a student, in making this video here, a student was commenting on the ELSA app. And on the ELSA app, I was noticing in a demo, it was really just showing volume. And I thought this was a bit misleading because it made it look like all these syllables were the same length. In this case, the student had selected the second syllable as the stress syllable. So they got the stress pattern wrong. And this would be, for example, here, it would be at this like second to last syllable. So I thought this was not enough information. Actually, if I could go back and change the ELSA app, I would make it look like this, like more kind of a almost rectangular shape, that this was loud and long, not just loud by itself. And to support this, I was kind of looking at what are these contrasts between these unstressed syllables or even the function words versus the stress syllables and also content words. So like in terms of volume, this would be soft, or sorry, this would be, yeah, soft or quiet versus loud. And the secondary stress could even be kind of in between, medium. The length, this would be short, this would be long, and if it's a secondary stress, kind of in between, medium. And the pitch, this would be lower, like down here, or something high up here. So high usually gets our attention if something's up there. So we're also using that pitch in terms of something high and low as a contrast between. And so if we put this on some kind of a 3D display, we would get something over here in the corner, which is kind of quiet, short, and low pitch when it's unstressed. And over here, we get something that's much louder, longer, and higher when it's a stress pitch. And this is constantly going back and forth with our speaking when we're going in between syllables, unstressed syllables, and stress syllables, or function words, which are basically unstressed, and then content words, which are stressed in the sentence. So this dynamic is back and forth all the time when we're speaking individual words and also individual syllables in there. And we can look at these patterns, for example, like a two-syllable word, actor, after, apple. That first syllable is longer and then it's a bit shorter. So I went in and recorded all these words and then found these little spectrographs that I could put next to those words to kind of make this a bit more obvious, because we don't just see it when we're reading a text by itself. These things are not popping out automatically. We need to kind of go through this process of looking up the dictionary, consulting where the primary, secondary stress is, and what do we do? How do we interpret that in terms of our sound or volume or length or the pitch? So these are things that students need to really kind of go through that process. It might be a little slow until it becomes more intuitive and automated. And at first, you have to kind of go through those patterns. So earlier I mentioned the word before, or right now in the text today, those have a similar pattern, or guitar. So we have that weak, soft, unstressed syllable at the beginning, then this loud, long stress at the end of the second syllable. We might have some words that have like a 3-syllable pattern, maybe at the beginning, afternoon, company, hospital, or it's in the middle, develop, consumption, offensive, or possibly at the end of the word. There we also have a little bit of a secondary stress. Engineer, Japanese, referee, but it's that last syllable that has that little bit louder, longer stress. So there is a video to that. You can kind of go back and review that along with those slides that I put on here with this one, volume, pitch, and volume length, vowel length. Okay. Now I've mentioned that they are part of the score reports. Let me go back here and show you these score reports. So some students, when they've contacted me for the kind of speaking preparations, they have taken some of these reports that are from ETS, and they're about $25, the latest I checked on their website. And it's really just the speaking section alone. It doesn't involve a human evaluator. It's automated with the speech analysis, speech rater algorithm. And you'll see speaking, like these metrics on here where speaking rate, how fast are you speaking? So how many like words per minute? But again, not too fast, not too slow. There's finding like a pace. Sustained speech, this is where you get those ums and uhs, or pausing in the right places. Like, how many words can you go without an or or how many words can you go before you pause? And then how frequently are you pausing? So when I mentioned that students are doing this, these are too many pauses. Over here, these are too many pauses. That's like pauses in between every single word. That's too many. And the computer is going to detect that. And that's also going to affect the speaking rate. Here, this is better because there are fewer pauses and it shows more grouping and phrasing. So the computer is analyzing that difference to see, are you able to control that? Repetitions, this is also where we get some anxiety. If a student is kind of stressed out with the test, we're seeing this maybe and but also repeating some words. Like, I need to go to go to the library. It sounds a little bit like a stutter, but it can also be affected by stress. So we need to kind of calm down a little bit and not let those things affect our speaking. And also, quite literally, it could be saying the same word over and over. This is something I hear when students say, the student, the student, the student, and they're not using some variety, or the professor, instead of saying the professor, the teacher, the speaker. You don't want to change in every single sentence, but, or also using some varieties of he, she, the professor, he. Additionally, the biology professor. So having a little bit of variety does help reduce some of this repetition, but it isn't like a big metric that's affecting the score, but it is there as well. Rhythm, this is definitely where I've been trying to emphasize the fact that we need stress on certain syllables and stress on certain words. And then here where it says vowels, it is the pronunciation of the vowel, but it's also the vowel length. We see that here specifically, it is a measure of vowel length. Many students end up ignoring vowel length and they say, okay, we don't do this in my native language. And we kind of ignore that. And that's something where I say, like, okay, we don't have an excuse to ignore the vowel length. This is a feature of English. We need to include that. And the computer is definitely detecting it. In the vocabulary depth, this is also checking on the range. Is it a academic vocabulary range, or is it really just a basic vocabulary range that might be somebody who can speak at a conversational level, but not quite at an academic level? In addition to these score reports, there is a website that students have used, myspeakingscore.com, and there is a sample score report that is on here. See a sample score report. This is based on the website owner, John Healy. He's a TOEFL professor and he runs this website along with his team. And here's an example of a transcription that is being provided that's using the algorithm that is from ETS with the speech rater technology. And there's also a few extra metrics that are involved here that we don't actually get from the ETS report alone. So we do see some familiar ones: speaking rate, sustained speech, pause frequency. This one, distribution of pauses. Are you pausing in the right places? There's an explanation there. Yeah, like, are you using pauses appropriately? And then getting into repetitions, we saw that. Rhythm, vowels, vocabulary depth. Those are those 8 that we just saw in the score report. But we also see a few things on diversity, meaning, are you able to use nouns, adjectives, adverbs, verbs? How accurate is your grammar? How complex is that grammar? So that is very strong in there. So that's where I mentioned, like, the simple, compound, complex sentence variety. I've mentioned that at least once, so let me just go in here and share with you this Purdue online writing lab. And they do have some explanations on the sentence variety. Now, it does appear a lot in the writing section for the quality of your writing, but it does also affect your speaking if you can get in there. So yeah. So in the general writing, I'm actually going to use their search tool on here because you can open up these details and get a lot of things on mechanic grammar. There's a lot of great details here for the writing section. This is not specific for ETS. This is not specific for TOEFL, but there's a lot of things that are related for academic writing on here. I've shared this with a lot of students. There's a lot of things that you can work with, but specifically, yeah, the sentence variety. Yeah, sentence variety examples. Yeah, these sentence types. So yeah, they have that simple sentence that's basically a subject and a verb. It's technically one independent clause. There's no dependent clauses. A dependent clause happens when we get a conjunction. Compound is when we're combining two independent clauses. So we get something like comma and, or we get something like comma but. Here they had two examples that use and. Complex, that's when we get the dependent clause that adds in a conjunction. So something like after Mary added up all the sales. And that part of the sentence, that dependent clause by itself, is incomplete. It depends on the independent clause. This one cannot stand alone. It needs to be part of these two pieces. But this part of the sentence, she discovered that the lemonade stand was 32 cents short. Basically, she discovered something, or she discovered that the lemonade stand would. This actually introduces a relative clause. It's actually a little bit more complex than at first we see here. There are some other websites and some YouTube videos that go through the sentence varieties and do it a little bit step by step, so you can kind of get some control over the complexity of these, the variety on here. But basically, after Mary did something, she discovered something. Or while these are fascinating, this creates a contrast. These things are the real highlight of his art. So, like, yes, this is interesting, but this is even more interesting. So there is some kind of a contrast in that sentence, and we create that contrast with this kind of a complex sentence. And we're also adding in, as you can hear in my voice, while all of his paintings are fascinating, Hieronymus Bosch's triptychs, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that person's name, full of mayhem and madness, are the real highlight of his art. So I'm adding emphasis to certain words in that structure and trying to create this contrast from one part of the sentence to the other. And lastly, we can get something that's called compound complex or complex compound, depending on how you want to look at it, where we're getting a combination of multiple independent clauses, at least one dependent clauses, and those multiple independent clauses, they are connected by something like and. So this and creates a compound sentence. The because, that creates a dependent clause. Yeah, okay. Now they've given some really complicated examples that doesn't have to be this complex or complicated. I would kind of take it step by step and look at examples that you can see in other sources as well. So you can kind of get comfortable with variety and then start adding it into your speaking, adding it into your writing. But I'll include that here as well for this, the sentence variety. which is in there as well. Sentence type. And variety. Okay. And what else do I want to mention? Another tool that is here, Nata. This is a transcription tool. So you can get about 2 hours free per month, and it's free to set up an account. And what I often do with this is when students send me an audio file, I can get a transcription that is coming from the computer. And this also is a way to detect if your pronunciation is clear, if the computer is transcribing what you meant to say, and you can kind of see if there's some mistakes potentially there. What else on here? Yeah, phrasing, content, function, stress, time, yeah. So in terms of these details that we've looked at so far, we've got the stress that can be on the word itself. So with the primary and secondary stress, we can see it in the sentence with content versus function words. This then leads us to add some rhythm in our pausing and our chunking and creating these units. Stress time, this is English, where like the word that is loud or the syllable that is loud and long, this creates stress. And we can definitely hear this in English speaking music. And we can, if we relate that to music, we can see something like if instead of just doing like, I don't know, quarter notes, what we end up probably getting with music in English is something like, maybe we get like a dotted quarter note and then an eighth note, and then maybe, let's say, a half note. So if you have a musical background, you might recognize a difference between these like bum, ba, bum, which could be related with some text like first of all, as opposed to just doing first of all. Now that would be separating it, and that would be creating equal syllables. That is a difference. For example, Spanish or Chinese might have something where the syllable length, whereas this having a different rhythm of bum, ba, bum, bum, ba, bum, instead of bum, bum, bum. We don't want those equal syllables, equal length, equal volume. We want to hear this difference with something long, short, long. And that, what that does, that ends up creating some of these peaks and valleys, or peak, we end up seeing like, yeah, there's like this loud and long, and then we get this kind of short and soft, and then coming back up to loud and long, and then short and soft. So we want to see that kind of a contrast in these audio files, the spectrographs, and creating that variation in that strength and the speed. Also pacing, if you can control your pacing, your speed on there. Falling tone, we want to see that we have this bum, or in some cases, we want to see that the voice is coming up to signal that we have a dependent clause, or we have a list of words of, I went to the supermarket, I bought some food, and then I came home. Bum, 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 bum. So these rising tone and falling tone, they do create other patterns in our speaking. That's a little bit more advanced that I usually share with some students. Once we get those falling and rising tone patterns in there, and there's even more things that can create some contrast and stress in those words. Right now, I just want to kind of bring all these things to your attention. I don't expect people to kind of walk away from this and become an expert, but to just be aware that these things exist. Let me just give you a couple more examples with this like falling tone, rising tone. So in the case of like a list, and then how this applies to like part of a sentence, especially with a complex structure. So with a list, if we get like subject, verb, object, like I went to the supermarket. In a way, our sentence, our subject and verb creates some kind of anticipation, and my voice goes up. Where's this little line? Yeah. I went where? To the supermarket. This is the kind of complement that finishes that. So the subject and verb, this could be subject and predicate, like verb, verb, object. Specifically as a list, like I went to the supermarket. Why? To buy apples. And I'm going to do this in alphabetical order here. So I went to the supermarket to buy apples. I went to the supermarket to buy apples and bananas. Sorry, writing faster than I can think. So I went to the supermarket to buy apples and bananas. I went to the supermarket to buy apples, bananas, and carrots. Supermarket to buy apples, bananas, and carrots. Now, in this sentence there, I would start to have a comma there and a comma. Now, once I get to these like 3 items. Now, these 3 items, and I can keep adding more and more items to the list until I get to like the end of the alphabet. And every time I have an incomplete list, my voice goes up. So basically this is kind of incomplete, rising tone. Again, incomplete, rising tone. And then this is the final item, final, falling tone on there. Okay. So incomplete rising tone. I'll have to go back a little bit there. Yeah. Incomplete rising tone. Yeah. And carrots. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now this also ends up applying to our sentence structures if we have, so when I got home last night, comma, that is a dependent clause. And we will have this rising tone. And this signals to the listener this sentence is not finished. I ate dinner. And I have the falling tone. If I want to create a little bit more complexity to that sentence, okay, when I got home last night, I ate dinner and I watched TV. So when I got home last night, my voice going up. I ate dinner, but this time that sentence is not finished, and I watched TV. So this creates a little bit more, you have to be aware of where is your sentence going. And if you get distracted by the timer, you're going to lose focus of this. So you have to be careful with that. And you can also create some contrast in here where, like, let's say question number 2, where there's an announcement with the campus. So let's say, yeah, let's say that the man or the woman in the conversation disagrees with the announcement. So although, so this is an independent clause, although the university plans to build a new library, the woman in the conversation disagrees. So although the university plans to build a new library, the woman in the conversation disagrees. The woman in the conversation disagrees. So there I finally get to the last word in my sentence. I'm going to create some space there. So the woman in the conversation disagrees. Why? Okay, for the following reasons. So I can create some more of this rising tone, falling tone control with my pitch. Da, 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 da. So it's pitch and a little bit of a pausing in what the listener ends up hearing is I have some control with my sentence variety, and I have some control with my volume, my pitch. I'm a more experienced speaker when I can do these things. And these are the kinds of things that I would say a lot of students are ignoring if they're just like, okay, I organize my sentences. I do have some sentence variety. Now I also need to add some control with my delivery along with that structure and that sentence variety. It's not enough to just put that on a piece of paper in the transcription and say, oh, my work is done. We're also speaking. So we need to add this emphasis, this control over this volume and pausing and intonation patterns. We're not just robots who are texting and creating essays, because if that were the case, there would only be a writing section and there wouldn't be a speaking section. But we need to speak on this test. So we need to show that level of control on these details. And I'm pretty sure a lot of students are not aware of this level of detail and control on our voice on there. Okay. Now, there's also something I also want to bring to your attention here, which is called this like focal intonation. And what this does is it's an extra spotlight. And what we end up doing is we implicitly say something. We create some of a contrast. So let me give you one sentence here. So I never said that we should steal her purse. Now, based on the kind of a neutral interpretation here of these content words, I would probably add this, like, I'm going to copy that first here. So I would say, like, I never said that we should steal her purse. So that neutral interpretation is this negative adverb and the verb, and then this other verb and the object. That's my first interpretation of that sentence. Now, if I add some extra emphasis to this, so I'll put this with asterisks here. I never said that we should steal her purse. What that ends up being is, well, someone else said that. Someone else said that, not me. So I'm creating contrast. There is a contrast with the subject. I never said that we should steal her purse. Okay. I never said, really extra emphasis on that said, not only said in the first interpretation, but like really insisting there. So maybe this is, maybe there's a difference here on, okay, I insinuated this, I wrote this, I hinted it, I mined it. Maybe I didn't actually say it with words. Maybe I wrote it, something like that. So there is some kind of a contrast on this action verb. And it is playing a little bit with the semantics Okay. Now on here, number 3, I never said that can be we. So we shouldn't be involved in some criminal action. So we should outsource. Let's hire a thief. So this is a contrast on this other subject. So who should steal the purse? Yeah, who should steal? So not us. Yeah. On here, I never said that we should. It's a terrible idea. It's morally wrong. So it's playing with this, like, yeah, of course we shouldn't. That's morally wrong, but perhaps necessary. So it's, again, this contrast with maybe semantics of a verb. This, yeah. And then, okay, maybe I never said that we should steal. So we're playing around with the semantics of this verb and say, okay, not steal. Okay, let's borrow without permission and never give back. That's kind of semantics. It's stealing. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Let's like not kind of think we're no. Yeah, okay. And I never said that we should steal her purse. I'm okay with stealing, just let's change the victim. So yeah, I'm okay with stealing, but let's change the victim. So this is a different person's purse, someone else's purse. And no, let's not steal her purse. Let's steal something else. So again, I'm okay with stealing. I'm okay with the victim, but let's steal something else, like her phone, not her purse. So if we add that extra emphasis where we kind of break this pattern, like I never said that we should steal a purse. I never said we should steal her purse. I never said that we should steal her purse. I never said that we should steal her purse. I never said we should steal her purse. I never said that we should steal her purse. I never said that we should steal her purse. So each one of those words creates, in the person listening to us, creates a slightly different interpretation of that sentence. So if you can add, this is a very advanced technique on here, but you can actually insinuate even more information that you're not actually saying with your words. So, or in what this can also do is it can create some anticipation. So you can create anticipation and fulfillment of the anticipation with this technique. So when I said that although the university plans to build a new library, is although university plans to build a new library, so I have this contrast word although, and I have the what's going to happen, what's the plan in question number 2. I'm expecting some contrast on this side of the sentence. And so when you can control this with your voice, like, although the university plans to build a new library, the person listening here, they're expecting something different, and they're expecting something to contrast with that idea. And when you deliver this and you have some control with your voice, you fulfill that anticipation, and the person goes, oh, okay, that's a skillful speaker who has control over these concepts. Or if you do this for question number one, to say, okay, let's say there's some kind of a preference question, and it's like eat at home versus eat at a restaurant. And you're trying to say that there's two reasons you prefer to, eat at a restaurant. Like not only is eating at a restaurant faster than cooking at home, it's also more tasty, or let me more delicious, because the food is prepared by professional chefs. Yeah, oh, this thing is trying to, yeah, okay. So not only, the Grammarly wants to switch this. Not only is eating at a restaurant faster than cooking at home, it's also more delicious because the food is prepared by professional chefs. So if you can create this, stop. Okay. So not only this creates that there's two reasons why I would prefer to do this. It's faster, but also, yeah, not only is eating at home at a restaurant faster than cooking at home, it's also more delicious because the food is prepared by professional chefs. So this thing keeps popping up. So I'm expecting two reasons on here, and then I'm kind of fulfilling that, adding those two reasons with something like this. And so this is creating this kind of a focal intonation, and you can kind of create a contrast with some of these things. So I'm adding, for example, this faster, this comparative. I'm adding this comparative adjective, and I'm also adding this comparative adjective over here. Okay. And yeah. So these are exercises, and you can practice this with different sentences and see if you can add something. There's also voice actors, actresses in movies and TV shows that also have to go through this process and figure like which emphasis are they going to add to these words. And it is a higher level technique, but if you can start noticing it and adding it into your speaking, you can add a lot more control and quality to your delivery. Okay, so this is about probably where I want to wrap up for these concepts and just bringing these things to your attention. And let me just open this up to if you have questions, follow-up questions about these concepts and on here. So if you want to unmute, go ahead. If you have questions or any reactions on here. I'm seeing some questions here related to training and for all 4 sections. So yes, I do offer individual training and also some small group training as well. So yeah, I can get in contact with you individually. And I do have information on my website. I'll put this here with these lessons. So I do have packages here for individual training for TOEFL, package of like 4 lessons, and these can be on Zoom, just like today. And I'll include that also here. In terms of these links from today. Yeah. Okay. And if you have specific questions, you can get in contact with me also through WhatsApp or social media, but I'll leave this here for WhatsApp. So this. Yeah, so if you open this link, this can go directly to a WhatsApp direct message if you have questions about training things. Okay, yeah, any other comments here? Yes, great, okay. And I will plan to open up some small group training for all 4 sections for reading, listening, speaking, writing. And yeah, let me know if you're interested in that. And I will also include some links with the replay YouTube video for this. Okay, great. Okay. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, follow-up questions here, comments, feel free to leave a comment on the replay YouTube video here, or get in touch with me directly through WhatsApp or check out my website. Great. Okay. Take care. Best of luck with your training. And thank you for being here for today.